Well, hello, friends, and welcome to From Busy to Rich, the podcast designed to inspire advisors to increase profitability and quality of life for themselves, but then also for those they serve. With me, as always, Wes Young, and today we'll be continuing our talk on this dance around peak performance teams. So, Wes, why don't you do our listeners a great favor, do a quick recap before we dive into today's topic?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. This topic is massive. Literally, we teach a bunch of sessions on this in our Transform Learning series because it is so instrumental to really reaching your full capacity, your full capability. And so what we've been doing, we call it the dance of peak performance teams. We've gone over the last couple sessions. So if you haven't been tuned in, go back and listen to those, where we talk about everything from what is that? Like, what's the difference between an employee and a team member? One has a job, the other has a responsibility, and there is a difference. We talked about techniques we used in the interview process. We talked about assessments that we use in order to help really understand how is someone made up, because everybody wants a job in general. The problem is you can manufacture energy to do things that are outside of what you're actually built for a while. And unless you really understand yourself, your own DNA, and unless you understand where you get the most energy, you really will find yourself doing a lot of things that are unsatisfying, that you run out of gas for. So you ought to be, and everybody has to do those things, particularly if you're a small team or you are the team right now, but you don't want to live there. Like you want to grow to a place where none of those things are consistent in your life. You want to work yourself out of a lot of roles and jobs. And so we spent just two really useful sessions of kind of digging into all these things. So go back and listen to all those things. And I think we've got a good topic of discussion for today.
Great. So again, you guys feel free, go to the website, go back, listen to the first two, and then come back and circle back. So on today's topic, I know we're talking about really a lot of the things that for us have, maybe were values or propositions, but really became traits and characteristics. And I know you've spent a lot of time recently really refining that down to kind of three broad categories. So I guess high level, what are those? And then let's dive into each one.
Yeah. And so if I back into this, like just starting high level, our win, as we say on the podcast, because it's not only a win for us as a team of being a holistic fee-based financial advisory company, but also is the win when we do this podcast, is to inspire people to increase profitability and quality of life. And I kind of one day was just observing how well our team was operating and everything seemed to be clicking. And one of the things I love that Andy Stanley says is, if you don't know what's working when it's working, you won't know how to fix it when it's broke. And so I really thought, why is this working as well as it is? And there's a lot of technical strategy, tactic stuff that we do. But then one of them was like it's like team behaviors or ethics or traits, if you will, that, as you put it, Justin, that I see consistently emerge. That I wrote out this list, and I even shared that list with you of like these 50 things of like, I'm like, this is great, and this is occurring here. And then I distilled it down because nobody can remember 50 things. And then to these three things that I really feel like are at the core of our organization. And certainly these are muscles. They atrophy and they build, and you can develop them. So it's like knowing them, we have common language to talk about them. And I think about what do we do that really helps people the most to increase profitability and quality of life? Well, we empower people with transformative ideas and persistence. And so these three things emerged. It was empower, transform, and persist. And I'm going to briefly talk about the first two. We could probably do several podcast episodes on this, and then we're going to spend most of our time on that last one, persist, because I think it's so universal across the board. So to start with, empower is to give power. So what atmosphere are you bringing to the people around you on your team? Because we've all been in meetings where somebody comes in and they let the air out of the room. They take the energy level down, right? They're not helpful. And sometimes they're not even aware they're doing it. And then we've all been in that same room where somebody just brings the level of excellence up. that they are there, and you are so glad they showed up. You're so glad that they're bringing with them their, it's like the Bob Goff talks about, all the time. You put the cookies in the oven, and the aroma from the cookies that are left behind by what you just did, it just makes a much richer atmosphere. And so with this idea, there is, I love some of the ancient writings of, everything from Marcus Aurelius, Socrates, Aristotle. One of my favorite ancient writers is the Apostle Paul. And if you don't know much about him, he like was responsible for writing 2/3 of what we would call the New Testament. Whether you're a Jesus follower or not, there's some really good nuggets in there of truth that will help any movement grow. And so one of the letters he wrote these series of letters to these churches that were planted and developing. And this is not like today when you think about planting a church where it's like, hey, I hope this works. It's like penalty was death if this thing didn't go well. So this is like not a casual endeavor. So they were dealing with a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, many of the things we won't have to deal with. But some of the things that he wrote are so universal and applicable to what we do in growing our teams, high performance, peak performance teams. And one of the things he wrote is in the letter to the Ephesians was, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what's helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So when it comes to this idea of empower, this one thing, what I notice consistently about our team when we're operating at our best is there is this universal kind of essence of empowerment. The meetings we're having are all about building others up, about giving them what they need. Now, this isn't about just being nice either, because sometimes to empower someone, you have to root out and pull down the things that getting in their own way. And there's a way you do that is empowering. And there's also a way that's debilitating. And so the best leaders that I know are those that bring an empowerment. It's not they're always nice. It's not they're always saying, and by nice, be nice, but they're bringing up hard discussions. They're having difficult discussions, but they lead to a better outcome. And some of the best people that have been coaches in my life have been able to tell me hard things, have been able to bring up things that, hey, one of the things we do regularly, as you know, is we kind of autopsy our meetings. So we're in meetings together all the time. And one of the consistent conversations is, all right, what did we do that was great in there? And then also, what do we see that maybe we can do better, make it more beautiful? Because empowerment's all about creating beauty. It's like this atmosphere of excellence. How do we turn it up a notch? And I've got one specific example before we move on. Again, we could go really deep in this, but any thoughts on that before I do?
Yeah, just empowerment's an interesting conversation point, because typically when you think of empowerment, like you think of with a normal corporate structure, somebody is being delegated something to go do something, right? Like instead, and like when you think about it from the point of showing up and empowering, like bringing in power, energy, capability, enthusiasm to help the collective move forward to whatever the goal is. It's just a different concept, right? It's another level.
Yeah.
Yes, you still get the delegations and the ability to go do all of that other stuff, but it's done differently. It's not just like a taskmaster, like handing off and like saying, hey, here you go, right? Like there's an excited enthusiasm about what we're trying to accomplish and a better understanding of why.
Yeah.
From my perspective, what I've seen is you get a lot more ownership out of things from people, right? There's mutual buy-in on what we're trying to accomplish versus I've been delegated over and handed off this thing that I have to do that somebody else doesn't want to do and seen as such.
Yes. I love that. And I think, one reference point that we can link to in the show notes is I think it was one of my favorite podcasts that we did was the 4 levels of delegation, because it's a common language for you to empower the people around you to do things. And everybody has agreements on, based on what it is, what that dance is going to look like, so that you don't just say, hey, I delegated it. Well, what kind of delegation was it? Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And so you can go back and listen to that. The one example I'll give, and then we'll move on, that is one place this shows up. It shows up a lot of places, but we have a kind of this narrative of no meeting after the meeting. And so just think about this with me for a second. We've all been on team meetings with everybody there. And we've all left that meeting, and in some way, if it's not happened to you yet, it's going to. Somebody calls you, or maybe you call somebody, because I've certainly been guilty of this, to say, can you believe what so-and-so said? Can you believe they want to do this? Can you believe that this initiative, I mean, it's either crazy, it's not going to work, or boy, they're doing that. And let me just tell you, that's not empowering. What that is debilitating. That's a cancer to any organization. And if your team is full of people having meetings after the meeting, and maybe I mean, I've had really good team members that fell into this on both sides, where because they want to be empathetic, they want to they get that phone call, they want to be a shoulder, for people. But is it an empowering shoulder, or is it one that you're just sitting in a rocking chair of blame, of negativity? It's letting the air out of the room. It adds no value in creating beauty. So quite often, what you have to do is address it, and you say, "Hey, look, I get it. You might not be aligned with either the vision, or you might not yet be on board with this particular tactic." I would go talk to them about it, because talking to me about it's not going to be very helpful. And let me tell you, that's not popular, because they're looking for a shoulder to cry on. Then they're going to maybe go have a meeting after your meeting with somebody else, right? That, hey, do you believe? And they're jerks or whatever it is. But we can't tolerate that organizationally. That's one of the things. Again, it's empowering to give people that language to go. If you have people that are coming to you and having meetings after the meeting, or if you find yourself being the person that's having meetings after the meeting, that's a cancer, and it's not going to lead to anything beautiful. It's going to create ugliness and chaos. So empowerment, there's tons of examples of it. The second one is transform. So transform literally means to make beautiful. It is the way we define it. And again, there's a great letter to Romans that is, it says, don't conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And transformation is this amazing normalize the new mentality that we all know something. If we want things to be better, they've got to be different, because you can't have better without different. You can have the same, you can have worse, but you can't have better. And so, because we talk about this all the time, is our greatest opportunity to recognize our future possibilities is not about abandoning our normal necessarily, but it's also not about rejecting new. It's about keeping tension between the two. So in our organization, we have new stuff that we are trying on all the time. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to work in its initial form. We've got to iterate it, but you have to have a spirit of transformation where it's not like this one thing we do once a year where, okay, here's all the new initiatives and let's go see if they work. It's a quarterly, and then for some of us who are really tweaking it, it's a weekly thing where we're going, okay, let's redesign, let's iterate and redesign. If you want to work in our organization and you are not willing to participate in that, and listen, we got people that just the natural wiring is they don't like change, they don't like new, but they recognize that it's a necessary component to getting where they want to go. And if we have a good bit, and sometimes this is as the point leaders in an organization, you've got to have a vision out there that everybody's excited about. And if they're not, they shouldn't be on the team. But if they're excited about it, then helping them understand, you recognize we can't get there by doing what we've always done. We've got to continue to update, upgrade, and sometimes replace things that we were doing before. One of those things in peak performance teams that I think is a good example before we move on to the main one we're going to spend the rest of our time on today is this idea of replicate and or replace. Replicate and or replace. So, you do your triple T tool that we talk about all the time, and you figure out all these things that if you could not have to do them, you would love someone else to do them because they're just, you don't have energy for them. You're probably not as good at them. You can manufacture energy for it, but it just wanes off pretty fast. And as leaders all the time, I see they hire people and we're trying to get them into a seat on the bus they've not yet been in before. Or if somebody's in that seat and we need them to switch seats to gain new responsibilities. But then what we need to do is focus on what do I need to do to empower this person to transform into this new responsibility? And it's always slow. Like I'll give you specific examples is when We hire, like right now, we've got some great paraplanners that we're developing in our organization, and Seth and Jordan. And there's a whole lot of things that you used to do, and you do it really well. Cody used to do, does it really well. Steph used to do, does it really well. And they will do it right now far better than either one of them, not because they're not talented and don't have capability. They're just new. And we've got, in some cases, decades of experience doing these things, but it's not our highest and best use going forward. One of our greatest initiatives right now is to get them to a high level of paraplaner excellence as quickly as possible. And the issue is, if we're going to transform, we've got to have a mindset of not do it yourself, replace yourself. Not do it yourself, replicate yourself. And that always involves slowing down in the moment. And remember, there's more things to do than there's time. And saying, all right, tell me how you thought about this. And what would you do if I wasn't here? And then working with them to get better at it. And it's clunky and slow, but long term, it is the bottleneck if you don't deal with it. Any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's just such a great point of that's the next evolution. Right? Like caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly without transformation. Like you don't
That's right.
get to another level and change things. And for me, this one, I think for most of our listeners agree, like we talk about this one a lot. Like we've got the Transform Learning series. Like this is truly ingrained to a lot of what we talk about. So no,
Yeah.
Nothing else on that one.
Okay, great. The last one, and then we'll camp here a little bit, is persist. And persist, one definition is to continue steadfastly or firmly in some state, purpose, or course of action, in spite of opposition, and sometimes in spite of opposition. And so, one of my favorite, again, it's same writer, Apostle Paul, when he wrote this letter to the Galatians, their church, because they were dealing with a ton of opposition, a ton of difficulty, really trying to keep the movement moving in the right direction. And he wrote this. And I actually have this one on my bathroom mirror, and I read it every morning. And it says, "Let us not become weary while doing good, for in due season you will reap if you don't lose heart." And a lot of excellence, a lot of the future you want to create has to do with you not losing heart. Don't grow weary while creating beauty. In due season, you're going to reap if you don't lose heart. Some things you just don't plant today and they bloom tomorrow. Some things require nurturing. They require that constant pursuit, that persistence. One of my favorite books is The Traveler's Gift. And they have these 7 decisions that he writes about, and great stories. Andy Andrews wrote it. If you haven't read it, it is maybe one of my favorite books on the planet. But one of the things, I'm going to read a somewhat long excerpt from it, because one of the decisions is to persist without exception. And so here's what he writes. He says, "I will persist without exception, knowing that I've already made changes in my life that will last forever. Today, I insert the final piece of the puzzle. I possess the greatest power ever bestowed upon mankind, the power of choice. Today, I choose to persist without exception. No longer will I live in a dimension of distraction, my focus blown hither and yon like a leaf on a blustery day. I know the outcome I desire. I hold fast to my dreams. I stay the course. I do not quit. I persist without exception. I will continue despite exhaustion. I acknowledge that most people quit when exhaustion sets in. I'm not most people. I'm stronger than most people. Average people accept exhaustion as a matter of course. I do not. Average people compare themselves with other people. That's why they're average. I compare myself to my potential. I'm not average. I see exhaustion as a precursor to victory." And the last part here, how long must a child try to walk before he actually does? So do I not have more strength than a child, more understanding, more desire? How long must I work to succeed before I actually do so? A child would never ask that question, for the answer doesn't matter. By persisting without exception, my outcome, my success is assured. And he has a much cooler, longer version of that in the book. But Justin, I think as I look back on 22 years of doing this work and what's led us to where we are today, it has been a catalyst that persist without exception, because there's always going to be opposition, particularly if you're doing cool stuff and if you're innovating and if you're moving forward into the future. And losing heart, people give up right when they're knocking on the door of their breakthrough. And if there is a quality the muscle that I've built, that I've seen in the people that tend to join our organization, and you and in the rest of our team, it is this tenacious, almost savage persistence, that we will do what's necessary to move to the next level. And that doesn't mean you just stay in an old way and just say, well, I'm going to really keep doing the thing I've always done. You persist in transformation, you persist in empowerment. It like adds qualities to these other two qualities. And new initiatives are always going to be harder. Sometimes you have bad days. There's a great story in another book that Andy Andrews wrote, and he tells a story about two young man and an old man kind of walking along, and the young man's just complaining. It's kind of cold out, and he's been cleaning fish all day, stinks. He's kind of walking next to him, and he just listens to him, and they're walking by a swimming pool. And as they get right kind of middle of where the pool is, the old man stops, and he stops the young man, and he looks at him, and then he pushes him in the swimming pool. Now it's cold outside, and the young man goes under the water, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, what's going?" And he comes up out of the water, and like all the mad was drained out of him, but he's like, what did you do that for? And so he helps him out of the pool. He dries him off, and he says, "Jones, again, what did you do that for?" And he said, "Well, it occurred to me, I'm not always going to be around to help you with your thinking. So I wanted you to learn this lesson that every day, every single day, for the rest of your life, somebody is going to push you in the swimming pool. You need to decide now how you're going to respond to it." And people that persist without exception know in advance, they're not surprised about it. There will be opposition. There will be things that don't go the way you thought, the way you said to yourself. It's not a pessimistic view. It is a realistic view that these are inevitable on my pathway to getting to where I want to go next. So just decide now. You're going to greet the day with just a joyful spirit that knows those things are there. You don't get thrown off by them. You don't freak out about them. You just get out of the pool and you do the next thing. So thoughts on any of that?
Oh, I love it. Like this one's a strong one for me. I've been excited to get into this one because it's something that resonates with me so much, in the sense of like you become resolute in whatever the objective is, right? Like you got this mindset that regardless of what it's going to take to get there, I've counted the cost. We know why we're doing it, and we're going to get there. It's just going to be a matter of time. We know there'll be challenges along the way. Even when you're talking about that story, it triggered the story. I don't know if you ever heard it. The young man who was quadriplegic that climbed Kilimanjaro.
Oh yeah, I actually heard him speak.
Yeah, they asked him that quote, like, "How'd you do it? 3 feet at a time?" Because that was the length of his body, right? Like you have to have a level of persistence and resoluteness, because to think that wasn't, or that was easy, like even just breaking it down to like you climbed the mountain, it wasn't just that one day that it was persistent. Like there was however much time in life leading up to be able to do that, right? Like he was like resolute to a point. Like I like the savage persistence.
Yeah,
there's nothing that's going to stop you, and that's exciting for us. And part of it is exciting in the sense of like it's also reaching for new goals, right? Like and new heights. Like what is
that's right
now capable. So it's not just getting past the challenges, celebrating wins as you achieve them, and then recognizing that there's future potential and even more and greater things than what you thought. He climbed Kilimanjaro, and I'm sure when he got there, it opened up a whole new world of possibilities for him.
That's right.
That he didn't see.
I love that. And, it makes me think some of the stories you've told me from a military perspective. The things that they did or had you do were so hard and so difficult. And most people don't last through that special forces training. They don't. And it doesn't make them bad people. It just means that they didn't persist without exception, right? They didn't have that savage persistency. But people that have gone through that and came out the other side, that's a team that you have a ton of confidence in to go into extraordinarily crazy, difficult, dangerous, in your case, situations, because you know what they've been through, and they got this quiet, controlled confidence and this savage persistency. And that's the way I would say our team is in what our work that we do every day. And again, we're bringing more people in all the time and building that muscle in them and continuing to strengthen and keep that muscle just ready to go for us. But if there was a quality, man, that I could just go and instill in everyone that had big dreams and desires for their next level of success, this is intangible and it is irreplaceable on a team. If you have this, if you don't, build it, and just understand it is a necessary thing. Don't grow weary while doing good, because you're not listening to this podcast because you don't have cool plans. Nobody does that. Those people don't listen to anything. They don't read anything. You're listening to it because you have big ideas, and you are savage persistence away from moving in the direction of that idea and ultimately achieving it and thinking up new things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say one thing, credit to you that you're great at is you get, in order to do that at a team level, you've got to find something to rally people back around, right? Like, and keep it front and center.
Yeah.
You get the ingredients of a savage persistence type person, but if it's not front and center, if it's not in your face of why you're doing it on a regular
That's
basis,
right.
it doesn't matter what you've got the capability to do. It's easy to forget about why you're doing it and lose
Yes.
that, right? So I think that's key. When you're doing this as a team of peak performance development and then maintenance is it's got to stay front and center and very clear and well defined. And so if you're not defining, if you haven't spent the time to define it as a team and then aren't finding a way to keep that as just part of like your normal weekly ingestion as a team, like it's easy to lose
Absolutely
like what you've got built up on your team, because you could have it all there and you just find yourself with people burning out and things like that. And you got to rally back to something.
love it. Love it. So I just leave everybody with this one idea. Go read The Traveler's Gift. And you're going to love that seventh decision for success. You'll love them all, but that just persist without exception, have a savage persistence, bring people into this conversation so they can see where they might not have it. And you're going to be so happy that you did.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening very much. One other note, check out the show notes. We've added a new feature. If you've got thoughts on new content, stuff you want us to talk about, or questions, follow up, you can leave us an audio message. We'll take that and we'll see how we can integrate that into an upcoming show. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you all. Bless you.
Reach out to us. Thanks.